Hello, it's me, Rabbi Jacques. I'm making this video a little short, a little perhaps not as prepared as I should, but to tell you about the story, behind the story of the catching of Adolf Eichmann in Buenos Aires in May 11th, 1960. So exactly 60 years ago. I must tell you that, again, this is based on many readings of mine, and I was a little boy, had the opportunity to go to Buenos Aires and insisted that some of my relatives take me there to see the house. There was a famous book called The House on Garibaldi Street. I went to see the house. House doesn't exist anymore. And it was quite miserable. But so let me tell you, and this is based on many of my readings, and I may not know all the names, but I don't think they're important, the story. So, after the war, there clearly was a desire on the part of Jewish survivors and Jews around the world to seek justice and or revenge against Nazi perpetrators. And among the many people doing things around the world, there was a guy who was famous, whose family name was Dimant, and he was a Polish Jew whose whole family had been killed by the Nazis, but he was a strong, good-looking, blonde, blue-eyed guy, a total hunk, whose job was to attempt to find where the Nazis were hiding. I mean, it's a known fact that they tried to hide. Some of them had money stolen from Jews. Some of them had quite wealthy families. There is the Mengele still is the name of a plant, and there's one town, I don't remember the name now, that's dominated by the Mengele family of the infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele, and they maintained him while he was in hiding in Argentina and then in Brazil. So this guy tried to get close to the people, especially the women of the Nazis, because every big Nazi had his wife and had a lover. And he would get close to them, do whatever he had to do to attempt to figure out where the guy was. So he tried to get close to Vera Eichmann, who, by the way, in this whole story that I'm going to tell you, which is quite sordid, is the only person that comes across as a decent human being. Nobody else, you're going to find out, was decent. So she was living in Switzerland. He tried to get close to her, in a carnal way, which was his MO. Didn't work. But he got at least enough to be friend of the family, to the point that she, Vera, had 3 boys who were very little then. I mean, like, we're talking 5, 7, something like that, 9, whatever, little boys. Those were Eichmann's 3 boys. And they got to be so good friends that she would let him take the boys on outings on a boat to go around one of the Swiss lakes. Again, right now I don't remember which one. So he was a Mossad operative. After trying for a long time to get close to her and to figure out where Adolf Eichmann was, he failed. He asked permission from his boss to say, listen, she lets me take those kids on the lake. If you give me permission, I will kill all 3 of them, all the 3 kids, because in as much as we cannot find him, at least he will experience some of the loss that we feel. His boss, who then was the head of the Mossad, said, absolutely not, we're not like them. So he went on his way. Curiously enough, this is what eventually led to Eichmann's capture. Why? Because eventually they move to Argentina. Vera Eichmann, with the 3 kids, kept their names. That's how secure they felt in Argentina. Let's not forget that at the end of the war, the dictator Perón gave 10,000 Argentinian passports, blank Argentinian passports, to the Nazis so they could escape to Argentina if they so choose. And Adolf Eichmann took a different name, Ricardo Clement. But he was living in this house, and trust me, it was a shitty house. It was a 2-3 bedroom. I mean, it's a house almost like what you see in the movie if you saw the movie. And it was in the middle of nowhere. I mean, from the center of Buenos Aires, where my family lived, took us almost 2 hours to get there. It was like far, 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 in the middle of nowhere. Okay, very, very poor area. So, what happens? One of the Eichmann boys, the oldest boy, goes to university, meets a nice Jewish girl, and he begins dating her. She, by the way, lives, it's an older woman now, and lives here in the United States. I read all this story in many books and magazines. Her father here, people knew the Nazis were around, and there was the word, and one of the words was there was some Mossad operative operating inside the Israeli consulate or the embassy that spread out the word that they would pay, I don't know, at that time I think it was $10,000, which would be today maybe $250,000, for to anybody who gave some lead to find the 2 biggest Nazis they were looking for were Adolf Eichmann and Joseph Mengele. Joseph Mengele, who, by the way, when I was a little boy and I would be on vacation, we went to a resort that had a barrier of trees, so you couldn't see the other side. But on the other side there was a road, and just 300 feet away was the house where Mengele lived. So I can say I used to spend my summer vacations with Joseph Mengele. But anyway, so when you're from Brazil, your connections are very deep, and that stuff. So this girl told the father, I'm dating this boy, and I think his father is a Nazi. Well, the father goes. What really happened is not necessarily what the movie that you saw is out there, but rather the Mossad finds Eichmann thanks to this girl's testimony. Okay. The interesting story, however, is that after everything is done and they capture him and they take him to Israel, her father goes to the Israeli consulate embassy to say, okay, thank you very much, and they welcome him. Thank you, you did a wonderful thing, you helped the Jewish people. He said, good, where's my money? And they say, what money? The money you promised me. No, no money. And the guy begins raising hell. This Mossad operative says, if you don't leave now, I'm going to make your life miserable. He then doesn't leave. The Mossad operative ended up turning him over to the Argentinian police, accusing him of being Mengele, which they knew wasn't true. And so the reward for this guy turning Eichmann in was getting deep trouble with the Argentinian police, and his whole life he had a record. Finally, he was exonerated by the police. Israel has recognized that he wasn't Mengele, but never give the money, don't worry. And he was finally exonerated thanks to the work of his niece, who still lives in Argentina, and Bnei Brit. So that's a story that's not maybe so pretty, but, and again, as I told you before, the only that comes along and is good in the story, that's a decent human being, was Vera Eichmann. That's it.